The views and opinions expressed in The Fact Is with Hollis Grant are those of Hollis Grant and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Droids Canada Network. Droids Canada Network does not take responsibility for any content or position produced by Hollis Grant and his show. Listener discretion is advised.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Thank you for tuning in to another edition of The Fact Is. I am your host, Hollis Grant. And today, on today's show, we're taking a look down under in the country of Australia. And I'm sure if you're well informed, if you're looking towards any type of YouTube channel or talking to people that you may know that live overseas, you will know the situation of Australia. Australia has been lockdowns much worse than anywhere in the world, with the exception of China at the beginning of the coronavirus outbreak. But they have snap 7-day lockdowns that last longer than that. There has been protests. There have been 70-year-old women pepper sprayed in the face, kicked by police officers. We have police officers choking people that are not wearing a mask. It's very violent, very physical down in Australia. But what is it that they're really doing to combat COVID-19? And what's their long-term plan in terms of the government? What's the government wanting to do? Because we know the police are just controlled by the government, but what's the long-term plan for the government? Well, if we're going to take a look at Australia, we should go to the source, and we'll take a look at the Victorian government here. And we're going to go to vic.gov.au, Victorian Quarantine Hub. Yes, building a quarantine hub. This is an official website of an Australian government. It says, Victorian Quarantine Hub, protecting the community from COVID-19 with a purpose-built quarantine facility. The project summary. With quarantine continuing to be a critical part of the Australian response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Victorian and Australian governments, a province of Australia, have committed to building a purpose-built quarantine accommodation hub outside Melbourne's CBD to combat and protect the community from the highly infectious COVID-19 virus. The commitment followed the development of a business case by the Victorian government, which was submitted to the Australian government for approval. A project summary of this business case can be found here, and that's accessible on their website, a 5 megabyte PDF file. The business case identified as a preferred site at Donnybrook Road, Mickleham, at the site of the existing animal quarantine facility owned by the Australian Department of Agriculture. On the 24th of June 2021, the Australian government confirmed that this will be the site of the new facility. COVID-19 quarantine is an important feature of our public health response to the COVID-19, and this new purpose-built hub will be designed and built with the primary purpose of ensuring the safety of our community. The design of the new hub is fully informed by experts in public health and infection control, and is based on the existing standalone facility currently operating at Howard Springs. With its cabin-style outdoor accommodation, Howard Springs has been widely acknowledged as the safest and most functional design for quarantine in Australia. Now, there are some interesting videos on YouTube of prisoners or quarantine members waiting for their food to be delivered. They're delivered 3 meals a day. And any one question in a free society, what or why is the government determining when you can and cannot eat? A basic right of whatever you want to do. If you want to do it, do it. Grabbing a snack you can't do because the government is telling you when you can and cannot eat. Does that seem like a quarantine facility or a jail? The master plan for the new hub includes dedicated on-site services, including catering that is tailored to be delivered alongside strong infection control and prevention measures. The first stage of the hub will provide 500 beds with a second stage doubling capacity a short time later. It is also designed with the ability to increase up to 3,000 beds as part of a scalable build if a larger facility is determined to be required at any point. The new hub will also be designed with relocatable cabins that it can be utilized for alternative and future needs, including ongoing quarantine arrangement, crisis accommodation, and other emergencies. And it gives some nice pictures of what these jail cells will look like, or quarantine facilities will look like. And it goes on to who's funding the project and why do they choose these particular locations. But really the big question should be asked is quarantine facilities. Now, we know that these facilities cost millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. So to use it for a one-time or a short duration, such as a seasonal flu, or in the case of COVID-19, maybe a 1 or 2 year flu, before it changes onto something else, because we know that flus change year over year. Again, going back to our old episodes, we take a look at flu stats from prior years. Case in point in 2014, 2015, 2006, when they first list COVID, SARS. Then it was removed because it wasn't in season for a few years. Then it comes back. These things move. They have an ebb and flow. For instance, the ozone layer, the hole over Antarctica that was discovered in the 90s, has now closed. But yet there's still holes elsewhere in the ozone. But the natural world has ebbs and flows. It has seasonality. It changes. Things change. So to dedicate hundreds of millions, $220 million of taxpayers' money going into a facility to house sick people with the flu for a year, is this something that Australia is going to have for a year and then they're going to drop the project? Or what's going to happen to these facilities 5 years down the road? Are they still going to be used for quarantine camps for the next flu? Are they still going to have citizens in Australia locked down for another 5, 6, 7 years? Going back to 1996 was the year where Australia paid people for their guns. Australia mandated a program. It was a buyback of all your weapons. And you went in and you handed over your firearms. The government gave you cash. If you did not do that, the government came for your weapons and took them. It was a way to de-arm society. And today, in the streets in Australia, you have riot police shooting rubber bullets at construction workers who just want to work, that don't want to get vaccinated, that have made their personal choice not to get vaccinated, shooting them with rubber bullets, with tear gas. You have police assaulting 70-year-old women that go to these protests. You have police choking out people on the street for not wearing their mask correctly. And by correctly, covering their nose. You have a police state that's run amok. And it all started from when government took their guns. Another case in point for government taking guns is Venezuela. When the Hugo Chavez regime took over, one of their big ideas was to take all the guns from the people, and what happened? And in a few years, once again, the citizens protested and could not, and were met with military resistance. The only difference with Australia and Venezuela is that it's not the military fighting back, it's the police that's fighting back. So what will these quarantine facilities be down the road? Will it just be for people that are sick with the flu, or will it be a re-education center for people that go out and protest or don't agree with a vaccine, or maybe make a personal choice not to have a vaccine, and if they're not going to be a part of society, take them away and put them into a re-education center? And if they get a vaccine, then they can leave. Will that be the purpose of it? It's no secret that in Canada, Justin Trudeau wants to do the same thing, and they do have quarantine facilities that are currently operating. The quarantine protocol in Canada is to go to a quarantine hotel. Now, the details of who pays, how much they pay, and the rules with Canada versus these operators of hotels is classified information. If you were to ask for that document through the Freedom of Information Act, you will see pages of redacted information that detail what the fees are, how the program would run. Ask yourself, why would a government cover up information? Why would a government redact information and hand you a page of nothing but blacked out ink? This is not a matter of national security. If we follow the rules, or if we follow what these politicians and bureaucrats are saying, we're all in this together. It's for the greater good. 2 weeks to crush the curve. If it's 2 weeks to crush the curve, and we're approaching 2 years later, and information about public health is redacted and hidden from you, is that an open and transparent government? Because we can go back to 2017 when Justin Trudeau ran for Prime Minister and ran stating, is an open and transparent government, that he would be different than Stephen Harper's government, correction 2015, that he would be the most open and transparent government. But yet here we are today in 2021 with redacted information on how a program works to quarantine Canadian citizens when they arrive into the country. So when we look at Australia as an indication of what can happen in Canada, because Canada and Australia have the same style of government, the same legal systems, and that same culture, and where will Canada be? Because we know in Canada we already have the QR codes to scan you. If you're going to go sit down and eat and you don't bring the correct paperwork, you will be kicked out. You'll be forced to leave. If you walk into a mall, into a food court, and order pizza and you want to sit down in the food court, you make sure you have your papers. And this QR code and these papers and demanding people present their vaccine certificate is happening in September in week 39, and we know by going to the Canadian government own information, and we know that flu season starts at week 41. We can go back, and we have done this on this show, Droids Canada, for prior episodes. We have done this through this show where we looked at every single flu season and what week it started, and we can say at week 41 is where we'll see increases. So as the numbers start to grow in North America, they'll start trailing off in the southern hemisphere, because it is coming into summer. But as it starts growing in North America, and especially in Canada, and you'll see how governments respond, and you'll see that this vaccine passport will not end until April, is where you'll start seeing a discussion about the numbers dropping, and is it time for these bureaucrats to give up power? Because the real test of a government in any time in history, in anywhere in the world, has always been, when will they give back emergency powers? And one great example that we can use from Canada is the taxation system that we have. because taxation in Canada was implemented for the war effort. The reason why that you pay federal income taxes for the war. And as we near 100 years without having a war, we still have taxation and income tax. So when government holds on to power, be careful. And how will the provinces hold on to power? And you'll see that play all through winter, and we'll see in April what happens. Until then, I'd like to thank you for tuning in to another edition of The Fact Is. I'm your host, Hollis Grant. You have yourself a great week.
Dan, what happens every Thursday?
That would be DCR Droids Canada Radio.
And what time is it on Thursday?
That's from 9 till 11 p.m.
Dumb question, where do you find it?
You find that at accessradio.ca.
And what's the best part?
It's